Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Mocha DMINTI podcast. I'm Colborn, joined today by conceptual artist Sterling Crispin. Sterling, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, totally. Thanks for having me. I'm stoked.
It's a real pleasure and a real honor. I would love to just give the space in the beginning for you to tell your story. Anything you want to share, just some background and intro so everybody is familiar with you.
Cool. Yeah. So, hey, Sterling Crispin, been making art with technology for a long time, artist and software engineer by day. Um, and yeah, I like to call myself a conceptual artist because I really just let my ideas kind of take me wherever they're going. And sometimes it veers off into places I've never been, but I kind of see my art career like a big spiral where I kind of return to the same ideas over and over again. I've been making NFTs for, I don't know, the last 18 months or something like that, but been in crypto for a little while longer. I've was mining Bitcoin in 2015, and of course, I lost it all to a wallet I don't have access to anymore. Um, and yeah, I spend most of my day job time working in the AR VR industry, doing like design work and technology prototyping.
Wonderful. So maybe let's start there. I think unlike some or perhaps most, you have a very rigorous understanding of kind of like the underlying protocols and all of the coding. I think you write in Solidity. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Yep.
I wouldn't go so far as to call myself a blockchain developer yet because there's some like very hardcore people out there. But yeah, I've got my hands dirty for sure.
And it certainly does tie into your practice, which is very unique. So
Yeah,
maybe we could start and talk about some of, I guess, those principles that you like to explore with smart contracts. Um, and I'll leave that rather open ended. Yeah.
yeah, sure. I mean, I think one of the interesting things with smart contracts in general is that, you know, ETH is kind of just like programmable money and you can do whatever you can imagine and code with it, So, there's some criticism that like crypto is like this hyper capitalist, accelerated thing, but there's no that's not by necessity. It's just like things that have emerged. And just like with NFTs and the profile picture and the 10K collection and the animals facing one way, like all that stuff is just like stuff that's emerged through market dynamics. And like the NFT protocol doesn't require any of that to be happening. It's like extremely open and flexible. And, it's likely that in the future, most NFTs won't look like that they do today, right? It'll just like become its own thing. And yeah, people treat NFTs like they're a category instead of like a fundamental technology that could really take a lot of shapes. And it's the same way with crypto in general. Like obviously it's awesome for just doing like financial settlements instantly instead of going through like 15 intermediaries and like a week of waiting for international wires and stuff to settle. So obviously that's like a big use case, but there's so much more. And I feel like as artists and creative people, it's awesome to just like make stuff up and experiment and like break the rules and try stuff out.
And some of the first work that I became familiar with were your NFT concepts on Foundation, and I really applaud both kind of the rigor and the challenge that you bring to people through those works, but also the playfulness and getting people to recognize that it really is the values kind of that they bring and input. I think at the same time, not only is there the one I think that I got where it talks about this is not the art piece. Maybe the token is the art piece, but then there's also, if you buy this one, I'm going to go buy a Porsche, or if you buy this one, I'm going to go donate all the proceeds to, a food bank. Can we talk about kind of those early experiments?
Yeah, totally. So, I went to art school and think a lot about like form and content and how like, taking the same artwork in a different material changes the meaning of the artwork, right? Like if it's a collage or a painting or a graphite drawing, like those all actually, the medium um, contains cultural information that changes how it's interpreted and what it is. And yeah, I think a lot about like how abstract expressionism is like painting about painting, right?
Mhm.
And if you think about like NFTs, like what would an NFT about NFTs even mean? And I think, since then in the last 18 months, there've been a lot of people exploring that. But yeah, I wanted to make my first 7 sort of as conceptual artworks, kind of in the style of Yoko Ono has this awesome book called Grapefruit that are it's just like written messages as artworks. So I was thinking of a bunch of like sort of provocative and playful statements like, you know, what is an NFT? Like, is it the token? Is it the image that's embedded in the token or a link to the token, right? Um, is it the idea that you're, having as you experience the artwork? Like, where does the artwork really exist? And
Mm.
one of the NFTs is kind of saying that like it's just in your perception. It's not really the token. It's not really the image. It's like this human experience you're having with the art. That's where the artwork is, right? Um,
And that would be property as a consensual hallucination.
yeah. I mean, there's a few that's that one too. Just like the whole idea that you can even own property is like a total thing humans have made up, right? There's no actual such thing as property, and people are like, you can't own an NFT. It's just like a thing in a database. And it's like, what's a deed? It's just this like piece of paper. And we all agree that if you have this piece of paper, then you own this lumber in the shape of a house. Like it's all just stuff we've made up and agree upon.
Yeah, and I think probably, in the early beginnings, there was no, this was really a consensual hallucination from artists that, there could be a better way and we could use these tools. And I guess where this question is going is, there was so much early promise, and then there was this incredible like market spillover effect. And I'm curious now, kind of in retrospect, how you're thinking of this evolution. Um,
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I think there's the space of what hasn't been done is so much bigger than what's been done. And that's really exciting to me. I think a lot about friends of mine who went to art school and, you know, like haven't gotten into the NFT space and how, power tends to consolidate just in any system. And um, I've sort of like, I read a blog post about it, but I really feel like profit sharing and, artist owned cooperatives and stuff have a huge role in the future, right? Where you could imagine a bunch of people collaborating and making work in a certain style, or people producing work anonymously or anonymously under like one moniker and sharing the
hmm,
profits that way, or like 5% of every sale on foundation just goes to everybody. Like, why not? Or
yeah.
5% goes to charity. Like, there's so many more kinds of like economic models. I feel like beyond the medium itself is super super exciting.
Yeah, and I think a wonderful point, because that was really explored also in the beginning. It was almost it was certainly an implicit agreement that, when an artist would make a big sale, and we're talking $1,000, $2,000, they would go out and they would buy, 3 or 4 pieces, 300, $400, and there really was kind of like this flow down effect, and this lifting up, and kind of a more egalitarian, community based approach. Artists becoming collectors of other artists that they appreciated, signaling to potential collectors, what they liked. And it really did build these ecosystems. But I think really after kind of the monster sale of Beeple is when it became much more individual focused. And then kind of, whether it was venture capital or Hollywood executives, they began to build different kind of capital narratives around individuals. And perhaps the question is, I mean, will experimentation, do you think, continue to lead us to new models?
I think so. And I think like that's almost one of the things that that will lead to that is that, like, if you're becoming super well known for a certain style, you're sort of disincentivized from leaving that style, right? Because everybody wants to buy that kind of work and you become known for a certain thing. But if there was like a pseudo anonymous profit sharing collective that you could just like whip up some funny Pepe the Frog meme that is like totally not like your work and just like throw it out there and see if people like it. And if it sells, like all your friends get a cut and it's like way more playful and um like free in a way. I feel like I'm a big advocate of like, experimentation and freedom and having fun and stuff. So I feel like there's plenty more space for that.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, and maybe it's a question about perhaps the nature of the currency that we use. So I think I'm quite curious, what was your initial draw to something like Bitcoin, and is kind of like going to the very beginning and dealing with the value layer. Again, Ethereum is very abstract. We could use it every day. Bitcoin is also rather abstract. It's intangible. But people have come together and increasingly said this is more and more valuable.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it is a trip. It's a big social experiment, and in a way, like you said, it's valuable because we all agree that it is. And like, why wouldn't it be more valuable than gold? Like, gold is such a ridiculous. Gold is so ridiculous if you think about it. Um, but yeah, I think I got really into Bitcoin. I mean, I heard about it in like 2011 on Slashdot, this like really nerdy news site, and I had like 11 computers at the time that were just like literally doing nothing in my art studio. And I was like, oh, I should buy Bitcoin. And I was like, it's going to be a waste of time. I'm not going to do that. So I already kind of like had this weird, regret about it. And then I was in LA, like working at this tech startup and thinking a lot about like Ray Kurzweil and his Singularity books about like humans and computers, merging, and $1,000 worth of computing power being equivalent to like every human brain on the planet. People were talking about like delivering groceries with drones, but at the same time, like California's farming with like 10,000-year-old groundwater, and we don't know how much of it's left, and like the environment is spiraling out of control. And I was like, all this stuff is happening at the same time. This is kind of crazy. So I started making sculptures that were kind of like this fusion of all these insane narratives, and it felt like for some reason Bitcoin was like somewhere in there at this like fulcrum of optimism and abandoning the old world and making a new world, and just like trying to make sense of all this like geopolitical change. And since 2015, it just seems like it's become even more of a fulcrum point for that like geopolitical change, because the dollars is getting, weaker. I don't want to say it's getting weaker, but like things have gotten really messy, and people are speculating more on Bitcoin. And so yeah, that's kind of what drew me in originally. And I really like got more into NFTs watching all the machine learning artists I follow on Twitter over the years. They were like super early into super rare. And that's kind of my like rabbit hole into that.
Okay, let's see if I can phrase this correctly. I mean, it's such an interesting dichotomy, right? Because we're on kind of this transhumanist path, right? At the same time that we're in like an environmental, perhaps collapse, institutional collapse. Do you see kind of like a saving grace promise in humans continuing to like fuse with machines to perhaps find better answers to the problems that we may not be able to perceive and kind of collect action around?
I do, I feel like machine learning right now, they're just like big pattern finding systems, and like our brain is arguably like a pattern finding system. And our world has gotten so complex that like having more insights into by these like pattern finding systems of like how we can sort of navigate our way out of complex situations, I think is going to be super helpful. I mean, we definitely need to like slow down on our CO2 footprint and figure out new ways of cooperating. I mean, I don't want to say I'm a pessimist, but I kind of feel like there's going to be some like majorly painful moments until people finally start agreeing with each other, because people just, they don't even agree that it's even happening. So it's like you can't take radical action if 40% of people don't think it's happening, right? Um, but yeah, I feel like we've always been like evolving and co-evolving with our technology. And I read something really interesting the other day where someone was talking about how our domestication of dogs gave us heightened sense of hearing and smell as like a co-species, so that like suddenly we were much harder to be a prey to predators, and it like increased our survival odds and sort of like changed us as a species, having this other species with us. And like, yeah, like you're saying, like technology is sort of, it's kind of like our second mind, right? Like I don't remember phone numbers anymore. There's so much stuff that I'm storing on the cloud and relying on insights from software and stuff. So it's it's definitely already happening. Like we're already cyborgs, right?
100%. Two questions, and I don't know which one to ask first, but do you think, and I kind of feel this way too, do you think that almost this, again, the addition of machines is kind of, instead of kind of leveling the playing field, really giving, power to the people that can access those? And then how do we ensure that the people that have access begin to deal ethically with that power?
Yeah, really, really good point and good criticism of all this stuff. Like the saying goes, like the future is here, it's just not evenly distributed, right? Like the
Right.
people in power have, uh, insane healthcare if they want it, and yeah, tons of insights. There's, people like Peter Thiel and his like uh, crazy investment companies that he could probably access all kinds of um, geopolitical information through. But yeah, it's a trip. Like there's we definitely live in a time of like really great inequality, and it's optimistic, but it's possible that like, you know, advanced enough robots will become cheap enough that they'll sort of replace the labor force of people. And that sounds scary at first, but like I think we do, like Elon Musk was saying, we have like a labor shortage. Like imagine if, America's population of 380 million or whatever we're at, imagine if we had like 700 million uh, robots that work 24/7, building us whatever we wanted. Like
Mm.
food and basic stuff would be so cheap, it would be free. It would just be this like insane, abundant society that we lived in. And stuff like that kind of gives me hope. Like who knows if we'll get there, but it's it's a possibility.
Yeah, look, I fully believe we don't have a resource problem. We have a resource allocation problem,
Hmm.
right? So as we are kind of, and it ties in very much to a conversation I was having, but as we continue to move up, some Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And people's basic needs, food, living, shelter, water, electricity, access to internet, access to kind of each other, um, is increased, then we open up and perhaps we remove like labor, then and I think this was very much kind of like the insight and promise and the idea of wanting to support creative people in digital worlds, was that this is it. We build economies of the mind, and we build like creative relationships where we are exploring. And I think in that, of course, art plays a very focal point in continuing to get people to reimagine, reawaken. Um, and then there is like a revaluing of art, and like the removal of the trope of the starving artist into kind of like the leaders of this new world.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think ideally we'd all just have time to like enjoy ourselves and like learn musical instruments and just, all be self-expressive, right? And be free from any other um, kind of responsibility in terms of like, yeah, having to work or get shelter or whatever, just having all of our basic needs met. Um, but yeah, it's super interesting, and it's incredible to see how much crypto and NFTs has brought together so many different artists from so many different genres. And like, I've talked to more artists in the last 2 years than I have ever before from all these different walks of life and stuff. Like it didn't used to be this way. It used to be that everybody was kind of isolated because, um, the market was super different and there just wasn't any overlap. So that kind of stuff gives me a lot of hope. Like there's so many systems that are changing.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe we can pivot a little bit, and I'm curious how you begin to access and assess what it means to have more powerful AI tools in the hands of more people. Things like Midjourney, things like Dali, allowing more people to kind of like visualize and create art. What is that unlocking for us all?
Yeah. I mean, it's been a trip to watch. Like I've been working with machine intelligence for a long time in my art, and writing my own software and like training little models, and sometimes it ends up becoming artwork, and sometimes you just grind on stuff for 12 months and it doesn't, it just doesn't materialize into anything. But yeah, I've made a bunch of stuff with that, and it's been interesting to watch it go. Like I said, from having to have a CS degree, like a PhD in machine learning, to it becoming just like a tool in Photoshop or like a website that you go to, right? And I think almost just like Photoshop or even the camera, like the camera, you know, displaced a lot of illustrators because now you can just take a photo and print it in a newspaper, right? And all of these new technologies like change the way we can make images and like have to kind of make people adapt and change what's value, like what our value systems are, right? So I think all these machine learning tools, like, they're just tools for the imagination. So I've seen lots of really talented painters and illustrators like generate images and then paint on top of them. Like if you kind of squint your eyes, you can see things that aren't exactly there, and like bring your own inspiration to them. I mean, I think it's probably gonna displace a lot of like stock photography or just like weird kind of clip art stuff. But I bet like, you know, people that make stock photography, unless they have like a really good sense of humor and they're making like really crazy stuff, like they probably would rather be doing some other kind of photography anyhow. So I don't know. I'm an optimist. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Maybe it's just a good segue to talk about GPT paintings and ideas of mountains, and let people know how that work kind of tied into this concept.
Sure. So yeah, like I was saying about like medium aware work, I like to kind of make art that's, acknowledges what it is. And yeah, GPT-3 is like a language model trained by OpenAI where, basically they fed it tons and tons of text and it's trained to predict what word might come next. And so you can use it to generate, news articles, like give it a headline that says like scientists discover like the world's first unicorn in Madagascar, and then it'll like write a news article about that. And so what I did was I wrote a description, basically like an artist statement, saying that like I had made this artwork with GPT-3, which was a language model developed by OpenAI, and took the outputs and painted each one onto a painting, and the outputs were things like, and then had it fill in the rest, right? So I didn't exactly tell it the ideas it should express, or the any kind of cultural content. I just basically described that I was making this artwork, and then it made the artwork in a way. And like any of these machine learning tools, they're amazing generators, but sometimes it's great by volume, but not exactly by quality. You have to kind of sort through and be like, okay, you know, it's like you're sifting for gold in a river. It's like there's tons of junk basically. And so what I end up pulling out is as much like a reflection of my taste and what I think is interesting as, what the machine kind of output, which is in a way, the model is kind of like our collective subconscious or something that's been trained on so much text.
Mm.
Yeah. And then I kind of plotted them like with some visual style with some code that I wrote in processing. And again, was kind of thinking about Yoko Ono's grapefruit and just these like, text-based aphorisms and stuff. And I think one of my favorite ones is something like, geez, I can't remember how it goes exactly, but it's like sort of imagining that you're becoming the wind or something like that. It's like I could never say it the way that it's phrased. It's super, super beautiful. But some of them are like, you know, weird news articles about like, or sort of, they're not news articles, but they're kind of these like strange headlines about, imprisoned people, or just like they all kind of have a different feel. So really runs the gamut of sort of the human experience.
I think that speaks to a very interesting, perhaps novel concept around fluidity of identity, of artist as curator and collector, on no longer having to be one thing and exist within that box, exist within that label. Suddenly, we get to almost be anything and exist in this playful nature, and you don't have to make the thing that sells at the gallery because that is what is in, I guess, your interest. But is this part of, and this I think is a scary concept for a lot of people to grapple with. Maybe a younger generation is more trained in quicker fluid systems, and I'm just curious how you might perceive this, and if this is like perhaps maybe a next stage of our evolution.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point about like a generational thing, like older generations, like it was so hard to communicate to the world, right? There's so many gatekeepers. It's like, okay, here's my chance to communicate who I am. I have to have this like tight knit identity and this like body of work. Like people are always giving me a hard time in art school. Like you have to have a cohesive body of work. It's like, why? What? Who told you that? And it's because you want to be able to say like, oh, I'm the red painting guy. And then you can tell the gallerist that, and they can tell a collector that, and they can tell the newspaper that. And through these like really narrow channels of communication, you could just get like one message across, right? And I feel like since we can all sort of self-publish things to anyone in the world, you can sort of be known for a lot of different things. And, it's still probably helpful to have like some cohesiveness, but people can always just also follow you because of your personality and what you think is interesting. And I just feel like there's so many ways of being yourself in the world that like, life is short, and it's like important to just go um, with that and like adapt to the changing times. And yeah, like you said, like for me, it's almost like having like an artist assistant. Like my dream would be to just like be so like materially wealthy that I could like hire people to help me make all my ideas and just like have ideas and watch them come into the world. And like, of course I like make things with my hands and stuff, but like, I feel like machine learning kind of allows you to do that in a way. Like, it's been amazing. I've been playing with, OpenAI's Dolly and just sort of like describing sculptures that I want to see in the world and like trying to get it to make these like strange combinations of like high tech stuff with survival technology and these weird collisions of narratives like we were talking about earlier. And in a way, like seeing these renderings, I might not ever share them, but they're just like deeply satisfying for me, to check out. Like I don't even have to make them as sculptures, it's like this imagination machine.
Which as a collector, I'll say that I generally never collect based on somebody's like past body of work, but really where I think they will continue to creatively go in the future. What is their uptake and implementation of new tools? I love to see experimentation across the board. I think that is very much kind of like a just a shifting and important narrative. And then obviously to have like all of this built on Ethereum, which is an open access, permissionless network, allows anybody to go direct to market and to share it. Um, and maybe that ties in to, you know, perhaps something more recent that you've done, which is wiiiides. Um, do you want to describe that project?
Yeah, sure. So it kind of had come off the tail end of this art blocks project that I did. I really like just burned myself to the bone grinding on that as hard as I could, like, and building myself up like, oh, it's my first art blocks drop. It's got to be perfect. I'm gonna, spending like 13 hours a day working on it and just killing myself. And after that, I was like, I got to just like make some weird stuff and have fun and like experiment and like not have so much like pressure, Um, and I love going out into nature and just taking walks. And every time I do, I kind of have, tons of ideas. And for some reason, I was like, oh, it'd be funny if the CryptoPunks got wider every time you traded them. I was thinking, uh, yeah, I think I was brainstorming with a friend of mine, also just thinking about like how things can change and how like everyone's always talking about immutability, right? It's like you have this NFT and it's like unchanging and it's on the blockchain. It's always saved there forever. And that's something that's just like emerged over time, right? So yeah, wiiiides, it consumes the on-chain data directly from the on-chain CryptoPunks, which is kind of like a long story. Like first they were off-chain, now they're on-chain. So there's this contract that has all the CryptoPunks data, and then my contract, is ingesting that and editing the data on chain and counting how many times they're transferred and just sort of like stretching them out to oblivion. Um, and yeah, it's kind of like this smart contract parasite. I was also thinking about like Alvin Lucier. He has this piece called "I'm Sitting in a Room," where he just like records himself saying, "I'm sitting in a room, and it's not unlike the room that you're sitting in." And it's this whole paragraph about basically eroding the content of this message. So he plays it in a room, and then he records the playback, and then plays back that recording, and just does it over and over again until um, all the signal gets obliterated. And it's like hitting a gong and just listening to it go away, And that's kind of what wiiiides is doing. Like it starts with the CryptoPunks, and then by the end of it, it's like you kind of don't know what the traits were. And it's a little funny because if you know what you're looking for, you can still see it. But a lot of times they're just like they kind of just become like Bauhaus style modern art or something. They're just totally abstracted away. And it's also just like really silly, right? It's like they look hilarious,
Yeah.
like their eyes start like hitting the side of the image and stuff. So yeah, it's just like funny too.
I found it incredibly funny. I picked up a handful of those. I don't know if I'll ever trade them, but it's just like a wonderful metaphor for perhaps what the space has become. The core value with the punks, and then everything just getting stretched and rendered, and of course, just a meditation on entropy and perhaps intention. You could have any intention in the world as an artist. Kind of once you give it away to the people, the internet, who knows where that will go? And is that kind of a scary phenomenon for you, that your artwork could get misinterpreted or taken in different?
Yeah, I mean, I like what you're saying about like as a metaphor for the whole space, like the CryptoPunks birthing all of this stuff and watching it get distributed. I mean, wiiiides in a way too. It's like such a multifaceted project where it's kind of this conceptual artwork for me, and it has all this art historical references to me. But if you don't know those references, it's just like this crazy meme art, So I feel like it speaks to a lot of different audiences. in different ways at the same time, which is interesting. And like, yeah, I'm all about like embracing um like mixed narratives and like letting things be contradictions and like letting people figure out what um what meaning is there. I feel like that's really exciting. And also like I spent so much time really like grinding in the contemporary art world, like trying to make it in the art fair scene and stuff, and like really grinding away on artwork that was like hyper personal and like had these like really specific prescriptive um, narratives, and have like totally, I haven't abandoned that, but I've been like way more playful in recent years, just like trying to let go of my like self narrative. And as I feel like as artists, we all make these like really crazy rules, like it's got to be this way, and I have to do this thing first, and it's I have to keep my integrity by like doing this part by hand, and at some point you can create like a little, mental box for yourself, and it's healthy to just like break out of that. Like wiiiides doesn't look like any of my other art, but it's like totally, it's conceptually tied in. It's like part of the spiral, but it's like, you know, it's off to one side if you don't know what you're looking for.
When it clicked for me, I really enjoyed that one. I want to shift gears here in a bit of the remaining time that we have left. One, there was a incredible debate really in the early days about the environmental impact of Ethereum. And you wrote, I think, a very well-researched, just very powerful piece on this. So I'd love for you to just describe that moment, how that came about, and what, again, your intention was with that.
Yeah, sure. So, I had sort of known about the energy usage of crypto and Bitcoin in the past, but there was this website that got published by a fellow artist that you could type in an artist name and it would show you like, oh, like this other artist has boiled 100 Olympic-sized swimming pools to make this artwork, and this other artist has done that. And I was like, first off, this is insane. Like, is this true? Like, this is crazy. Like, this is the worst thing ever. I went into it like totally um, on the negative assumption that this website was true, but the numbers seemed so high. Like, and also like boiling swimming pools, like that's a crazy metric, right? Like, I don't know how much energy it takes to boil a swimming pool.
Seems like a lot.
It seems like a lot, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I being a software engineer and just like a data oriented person, went looking for more information, and it was also curious, like, I've made a lot of different kinds of art to try to survive in the world and make money, and I wanted to see how it compared to that. So I was gathering up a bunch of data, and at the time, I think Bitcoin and Ethereum combined was like half of 1%, or like a tenth of 1%, like a super small amount of like the world's energy usage, right? And maybe you can argue that's too big, but I also feel like, our attention is really finite, and like focusing on the probably bigger chunks of the pie makes more sense. But yeah, I kept going into it, and I was like, how does this compare to t-shirts? Let's say like they were kind of really grilling people, and like, if people had sold like 1% of his audience a $50 t-shirt, that would have been like, you know, 500 times the energy usage than his one drop. And then I started looking into like, what does it even mean? Like, how do you go from the whole blockchain and all the blocks to like a single artist, right? Like, how does that math even work? And it kind of really doesn't. Like, a good analogy is like a train station. Like, the trains are leaving at the same time every day. And if two people get on the train for their morning commute, you can't be like, oh, you two people are responsible for half of this diesel train. Like, it just doesn't work that way. It doesn't work backwards like that. So trying to single out specific people is just crazy. It's a fixed energy use basically. So yeah, I was writing about all that and just like the contradictions and like the the other things artists do to get by. Like even if you ignore the fact that you can't really work backwards from that, like if as an artist you ask yourself like, okay, I need to make $50,000 a year, I need to make 100 grand a year, like what's the lowest environmental way that I can do that, the lowest impact way? And like NFTs actually are like the lowest impact way of doing it. Like if you sell an NFT for $800 on average or something like that, that's way, way, way better than having like a merch store, or if you're like a Twitch streamer and you're trying to sell hats and stuff, like that's way worse than um, selling somebody an NFT. So it's interesting, and yeah, that narrative about the energy use has really like got its teeth like hunkered into people.
Yeah, there's a lot to say there, and that also doesn't even touch the fact that so much like clean energy innovation is happening around this, or it's hydropower, geothermal power, gas flare capturing. It's actually, in my opinion, like pushing clean energy narratives, because the one incentive is just to drive the cost of input as far down as possible.
Totally, totally, and like you know the infrastructure isn't totally there yet, but like solar is already the cheapest form of energy on the planet, and like because you're incentivized to find cheap energy, the renewables percentage is just going to keep going. It's just going to keep going up, right? And with the other thing is like everyone knows that these are problems, right? It didn't take an artist pointing to other artists and playing the blame game to identify that this is a problem. Like all the engineers working on this stuff know it's a problem. That's why ETH is moving to proof of stake and the merge is happening. That's all on its way. You know, hopefully, hopefully this year sometime the merge on the test nets is already happening. So, um, you know, the right people are working on the solutions. So that's good.
And it just became such a toxic thing to point at an artist and say, you are responsible for this. I know a lot of people took a ton of blame. And then, you know, there was also a lot of jealousy baked into seeing people be successful in this way and people shunning it. I was talking with a professor of visual arts, and they had become very interested in NFTs, and they were telling their class, you know, all about it. And she asked, you know, how many people would be interested in using it? None, you know? So it has become almost like viscerally very negative. Like the connotation around it is, I think there's been a lot of unfair reactions to it. But I think it's undeniable that digital consumption is more efficient and sustainable than physical consumption. And as much as we can migrate patterns into digital consumption and people relating that to their identity instead of like mass physical consumption, the better will be.
Totally, totally. And yeah, just the lack of gatekeepers and the like 24/7 global market that's happening, you know, the fact that you can just go directly to your audience and, you know, offer a bunch of different stuff. Like I've always looked up to Takashi Murakami, because if you want a Murakami, you can go to Uniqlo and spend $20, or you can contact his dealer and drop 10 million on like a chrome, you know, 100-foot Murakami, right? And
Sure.
I feel like in a way, like NFTs allows you to have a bunch of these tiered platforms where if you're an artist right now in art school, like, you know, you get famous on Instagram, hopefully, and then you sell prints. Like I don't know what the road to success is outside of NFTs. And I think like as people try to fight their way through that ecosystem of challenges, I feel like more people over time will realize that like the crypto ecosystem for art is really just like it's exponentially better in like every measurement basically. um
Well, I agree. And unfortunately, you know, this conversation has flown. I want to give you Any last words that you'd like to share? And please let people know where they can find you and your work.
Yeah, totally. Thanks. Yeah, I had a lot of fun talking to you. Yeah, look me up on social media, Sterling Crispin, website. Across everything. That's my handle. On Foundation and Art Blocks and Super Rare and all that stuff. Just launched wiiiides. It's a really funny project. You can pick one up for like, $40 right now, which is the cheapest entry point to one of my artworks. And it's a ton of fun. It's really funny. The Discord's really funny. Um, but yeah, in general, I would say like life is short. Have fun. Fool around. Fuck around and find out what happens, as that saying goes. And yeah, party on.
Party on, man. All right. Thank you so much. Colborn Bell with conceptual artist Sterling Crispin. This has been the Mocha DMINTI podcast. And we'll see you all next time. Peace.
See ya.